Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host Todd Tavares. This podcast moves beyond questions of God's existence to ask, what's next in a godless world? If you're enjoying the show so far, remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Beyond Atheism is produced and distributed by Atheist United Studios. Hi everyone, this is Nathan here with just a quick word before we start the show. I just wanted to do an appeal on behalf of a really great supporter of our show, Alistair Lichten, whose young son has a very rare form of cancer. Alistair and his family are raising money to help pay for an experimental treatment, and so I'm going to share a link in the description with more details and a way to donate. Todd and I would be really grateful if you took a look at the link and consider donating. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
Today, we're joined by Jeremy Schumacher, a licensed marriage and family therapist and former evangelical Lutheran. Previously engaged in mental health work in Christian settings, he's a recent deconvert who became certified in treating religious trauma in 2022. Since then, he has focused on co-leading a support group for men recovering from purity culture and building networks of secular therapists who also work on deconstruction work with clients. He currently has a private practice in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as the owner and operator of Wellness with Jer. Jeremy, welcome to Beyond Atheism.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to talking with you. Yeah. Jeremy, I understand you are an atheist, and I wonder, originally you were an evangelical, and I wonder if you can talk about that story, your journey from being an evangelical to an atheist.
Yeah, it took way too long. I like to joke. I talk about a story. I vividly remember I was a third grader. I came home from school and I told my parents, like, I don't want to go to heaven. Like, it sounds awful. I hate singing. Just have to sing for eternity. Like, strong pass. I don't want to do that. And they were like, okay, and kind of like patted me on the head and were like, you're gonna, though. That's good for you.
Right.
So I think I look at it and I can acknowledge, like, there are certain events in my life where I, like, definitely was, like, not comfortable or, like, knew that it didn't work for me. But I think because I'm a straight white male, so much of evangelicalism does work for me. There's a lot of privilege involved. So I stayed in it a long time, especially once I got into my profession as a mental health provider, like being that progressive Christian or that liberal Christian. Like, I worked with the LGBTQ community really well. And, like, I was that safe space for kids who could come out, and I would do family therapy and, like, help their parents not say they were going to hell and stuff. So I think, like, even when I was already aware that, like, I don't believe this stuff, or the morals that my religion are teaching don't match my own, I still, like, had a niche that I had kind of carved out where I was like, okay, but, like, I'm providing a service, even if I don't believe Noah put all the animals on the ark, or even if I don't believe in a literal heaven or hell. So it's probably, like, it was around COVID hitting was really finally a time where I was like, yeah, like, I'm an atheist. Like, I haven't believed this stuff for a long time. I had recently, my wife and I had recently had our first kid. And, like, I remember before ever, like, using the term atheist, I was like, we need to get all these, like, children's Bible books out. Cause, like, I'm not teaching my kid this stuff. Like, the Noah's Ark story and, like, some of those things that you teach your little kids to get them indoctrinated right away. So before I was using the phrase atheist, I was already pretty deconverted. But I think COVID really was, like, the space I needed to be, like, not in church, not involved in the community, not around the community, and, like, where I could look at it objectively and say, like, right, I don't believe any of this. So what's next? Guess I'm an atheist. And then kind of, like, figuring out what that looked like.
Right.
And so you were doing mental health work with, was it part of a church? Was it part of a religious network? How did that work out?
I was so fresh out of grad school. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I'm a male marriage and family therapist, which puts me a little bit in the minority in the psychology field. So I got offered a job before I was done with grad school, which, as a poor grad student, seemed like awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to job hunt at all.
Yes.
Sweet. So it was at a Christian counseling place. They wanted a marriage and family therapist. They wanted someone who was male. And I remember my parents are both evangelical teachers. They work at
Mm.
a
Wow.
Lutheran high school. And
Yeah.
so I remember talking to my dad being like, I don't want to work with a bunch of Christians. Like, that's not what I
Mhm.
want my career to be. Like, I grew up in that bubble. I don't like, that's not what I want to be in. And we went back and forth on it. And then kind of my laziness, path of least resistance, I'll say, kicked in, where I was like, sure, like, here's a job on a platter. So it was around then where I was at a Christian counseling place, but it wasn't affiliated beyond just that phrase Christian. So it was very like broad and expansive. So I worked with people under that heading, but people on the podcast can't see how I look, but I got long hair. I look like a hippie.
Mhm.
It's how I've looked for a long time. So like I had people who are atheists. I had people who were like, you look like someone who
Mm.
wouldn't judge me for doing drugs. So I came and saw you. So like I
Right.
was at a
Mm.
Christian counseling place, but I didn't just work
Yeah.
with Christians.
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then I actually did work at a Christian college too. So I have
Okay.
a
Wow.
weird, aggressive history. So I was doing, I coached there. I coached volleyball at a college, at a Christian college, and I was the director of student athlete mental wellness. So again, working in the
Wow.
mental health field, but at a Christian
Yeah.
setting. Um, Again, with that opportunity to kind of be like that safe space for the kids who maybe came to play sports and weren't super religious and didn't really fit in. Like I became that
Hmm.
person on campus that they could go talk
Mm.
to without
Right.
fear of like getting dogma thrown at them.
And Jeremy, during your sort of journey out of evangelicalism, like was it difficult, like personally or professionally, or in any kind of relationships or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely professionally. I was still at the Christian college when I was deconverting. I would say like heavily deconverting, like beyond just being like I'm a liberal Christian, being like, I don't know what I am, but like I don't believe the Bible. Um, so I think that was tough. I was, I don't know. I want to say like the job of it was easy for me. Like, so I was coaching, right? So like we did a prayer before every practice, and like that was super polished and easy for me to just like, sure, I can do a off the cuff 1 minute prayer. Like I've been raised in this for so long. Like it almost didn't mean anything even before my deconversion because it was almost performative. So, but I think like dealing with some of like administration and like things that I was like trying to get funding for mental health and the work that I was doing like coming out of COVID was like this really stressful thing, and seeing like, all right, yeah, this is like, I can't be who I want to be right now. I'm never going to use the word atheist in that setting, but like seeing the hypocrisy. And I think I was going through some of my own like angry atheist phase, working with a lot of like the administration at this Christian college not doing very Christian things, and like being pretty frustrated with that. My wife was raised in the same setting I was, different state, different but still evangelical Lutheran. And so like she had her own experiences being a teacher. She's a teacher. And working at a bunch of these schools. She's a feminist, and so like that's not what evangelical Lutherans want from their women. So like she had her own work history with like being kind of this like really great teacher, but maybe a person who's hard to work with in the church setting kind of thing. So she was
Yeah.
like waiting for me, I think, to deconvert and just be like, hey, like let's not do this anymore.
Mm.
So that was super convenient because in my work now, working with people who
Yes.
are deconverting, when your partner
Yeah.
doesn't deconvert, that's
Yeah.
really
Right. Right.
tough.
Yeah.
So it was super nice that she was like, great, you don't believe in the Bible? Awesome. Let's not go to church ever again. And so I was
Wow.
like, so I know that was like an easy win for me.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I don't know how long she had been waiting for me. But like I got really into like reading Richard Carrier, his work, and like I needed like the scholarly kind of like nerdy like backing on like this is what passes peer review in modern scholarship, because like I didn't get any of that growing up. I took a Bible history class every single year in my private school education, and all that was apologetics. Like none of that was actual history. So like
Wow.
coming out of it, I was like, oh, I didn't know any of this. Like I thought the Bible was written in chronological order. Like that's what I was taught. So it was like I needed to go through all those steps to be like, not only does this stuff not match my morals and my belief systems and what I like do in the therapy room, but also like okay, now I can see like the scholarship behind it and know
And
that like, right,
and
none of what
so
I
you're
was
talking
taught
about
was
the
accurate.
scholarship of religion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was, I think that was like for me the final piece before I could be like I'm an atheist. Like I needed
Wow. Yeah.
other people's expertise almost, like if it was a style of therapy that I'd never been taught before, it was like I
Yeah.
needed to like go in and learn and kind of absorb that from the people who were the experts, and then I was finally
Yeah.
comfortable being like, oh yeah, I guess I'm an atheist.
Yeah. So to me, this is fascinating because I know, like, one of the things that you just touched on was religious trauma. Like, the way your story sort of sounds when we get this little thumbnail of it is like you're working in the mental health field, it's in this Christian setting, and then you move on to religious trauma. It sounds like the narrative there is like it's this recognition of what religion is doing to people and how they feel, and that kind of moves the needle on you. But it sounds like really there was that needle had already been moved. It's fascinating to know that people were sort of people who felt similarly to you religiously or didn't feel particularly religious were able to find you.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think that deconversion process for me was a decade and a half.
Yeah.
Not going from 10-year-old me in third grade, but like literally, like I remember arguing with the pastor about communion when I was in high school. Like I was always kind of like tugging at it without ever, but
Mm,
like going to the religious trauma, like for me, like that fear of hell was like I wasn't having nightmares, I wasn't like scared, but like that
mm,
was a big motivator in not like fully questioning this stuff earlier in my life. So I think a
mm,
lot of people deconvert, when they go to college or whatever. I went to a public university. I went to University of Minnesota, and I was around all these atheists and people who weren't religious for like the first time in my life. And I think that's when a lot of people deconvert. And I just kind of like went pretty liberal, but didn't fully deconvert at that point. So like, I think the deconversion had happened so slowly over time for me, but the religious trauma part, I'd already been working with it without realizing that's what it was. Like because I was working with all these people who are LGBTQ,
yeah.
working with like working in an athletic department at a college, like some of those stereotypes about the women's soccer team exist for a reason. Like there's a huge population of LGBTQ people in the world of athletics, and so like I
Mm,
had this niche and I had this vast experience working with people who
mm.
like didn't fit the prescriptive
Wow.
narrative of what
Yeah.
an evangelical is supposed to
Right.
be, which is straight white and male preferably
Yeah.
in their mind. So yeah, then when I finally was like, oh, I'm an atheist, like that's when I was like, oh, I should like actually go and formalize my personal training on it. But yeah, definitely like a lived experience for me first, and then the way that my brain kind of works is like, right now I need to like
Yeah.
absorb and nerd out and like catch
Yeah.
up on all the stuff I missed. That was kind of like my formal deconversion, and then like it was a pretty natural step for me to go and get my religious trauma certification.
Well, could you lay that out for us? I guess both parts, because one, I had no idea there was a certificate in recovery from religious trauma. And I guess prior to that, the more important thing to lay out is exactly what is sort of meant or clinically defined as religious trauma. How is it diagnosed? How if someone is going through something, how can they recognize it even in themselves?
So I was kind of explain it as like trauma is what happens after a traumatic event. So we think of big T traumas and little T traumas. Big T traumas are like going to war, being in a really bad car accident, getting mugged, having somebody pull a gun on you, like those genuine life or death situations. That's what we always think of as trauma. But we also know that even with those big T trauma things, not everybody has like something like PTSD. Like people go to war and they come back and they're functional, like might even be totally okay. So trauma is not the event, trauma is how your brain processes that event. And so a lot of times, like with little T, what I call little T trauma, those are things like being told as a 4-year-old that you're going to hell. Like that's not a thing that your brain can process in any sort of healthy way. And so you might not have nightmares, might not have flashbacks like a Vietnam veteran does, but you're going to have like cognitive delays in certain areas. It's going to mess with your development. It's going to reshape some of the pathways in your brain because your brain's not allowed, it doesn't feel safe to go into that space. And a lot of what religious high control, strict dogmatic religions are, like they're traumatizing the brain. Like it's baked in as kind of a feature instead of a flaw, I think. And so it's tricky, it's insidious, I think, to see it when it's happening, because a lot of it's part of the doctrine. Like I was raised pretty conservative Lutheran, which was like double predestination, original sin, like all these like heavy theological things that like don't make a ton of sense. And when you start questioning it, then you're like, oh, well, like you can't question it because you're going to go to hell. And also, it's not supposed to make sense because you need to just believe. And so, like, it's this cyclical kind of snake eating its own tail kind of thing of like, don't use your critical thinking, don't question it too much. Like, so I think the religious trauma part's insidious. I think trauma itself is incredibly complex because two people could go through the same exact experience and one of them will come out of it with trauma or a trauma response and one of them they'll be fine.
Yeah. Wait, so Jeremy, were you raised with that idea that like you were I think it's like the select, like you're predestined to go to heaven, but predestined
Yep.
people
God knew at
don't
the time who
question
was
it. They
going to go
don't
to heaven.
think about it.
So we weren't like the celebrate our selection. We were like, a lot of, even though we were Lutheran, a lot of guilt and shame still. But it was like, yeah, God knew ahead of time for sure who was going to heaven. And God knew ahead of time for sure who was going to hell. And like, yes, we have free will, but God still knows what's going to happen, kind of
Yeah.
paradoxical thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a worry. And did you feel that worry about it? That maybe I'm not one of the select?
I think I had a lot of like fear of hell. Like I was a pretty imaginative kid, and just like that idea of like eternal punishment like weighed on me a lot for like not like again scared having nightmares, but like that was kind of the thing that kept me from tugging some of these threads that I think I wanted to earlier in life, where I was like, okay, like as long as someone can give me like a semi reasonable answer, I'll back off on it. So be like, I'd talk to my pastor and be like, I don't, if I had communion and then I had a heart attack and they gave me an autopsy, I don't believe that I would have human flesh inside of me. Like 0% chance. And pastor would like explain it with whatever apologetics they wanted to apply to it to like make me feel a little bit better. And like that was always kind of like, okay, like that's not a great answer, but like I'll leave it alone. So I think that like fear of hell was always kind of like that thing that was like I wanted to be okay believing it. Like I wanted to leave it alone so I could be like a good Christian still.
Mm-hmm. On the question of religious trauma, like how do we see that manifesting, like in people, maybe they were raised religious and they have this religious trauma, but how does that actually kind of manifest in their lives?
Yeah, I think the most common way I see it is really bad boundaries. So like my bread and butter, my original, what my master's and licensure is all in is marriage and family therapy. So I work with a lot of couples. So I see like it can be like extreme people pleasing. It can just be really unhealthy boundaries with family of origin. It can be really unhealthy boundaries in a romantic relationship. The Bible says a bunch of bad stuff about marriage and how to do relationships. But I see it a lot as like that extreme people pleasing, that like there were these people were never raised to have boundaries. Were never raised to say no to things like you're supposed to go to church. You're supposed to volunteer in church. You're supposed to volunteer to be on committees or be an usher or like whatever, give extra of your time. That's good servant minded leadership. So like all this stuff where people don't know how to say no, they're rewarded for continually saying yes and ignoring their own boundaries. And then like they burn out or they like, see some hypocrisy and then it makes them kind of question everything. So I see really bad boundaries as the most common thing. But like obviously there are more extreme examples, like doing this group for recovering from purity culture. Like those are people who have an intense body shame. They have a lot of shame about like natural sexual attraction. They have a lot of shame about even sex sometimes, even if it's in a Christian approved way. Like surprise, surprise, you can't raise someone to think sex is gross and terrible and bad for you. And then they get married and this flip just switches and they suddenly love it. Like, so like, depending on the person, the trauma can look a specific way around a certain specific thing. But I think in general, like I would say bad boundaries are the most common thing I see, that I would say like most people who are raised religious are probably dealing with some version of it, whether or not they think of it in terms of trauma. Like especially I'm speaking specifically of like the Abrahamic religions. So like Islam and Judaism and Christianity, like those are all patriarchal in a way where you're not learning good boundaries. You're supposed to submit to authority, and there's really clear power hierarchies involved in the church setup and relationship setups. And so I think like bad boundaries are really common, and then the trauma is kind of again specific to the person based on what their brain was like, nope, I'm going to shut down on this, and we'll unpack it in our 20s or 30s when it's safe to do that. But I think, when I'm introducing like the work that I do to someone who I don't know, or somebody who's like maybe still a Christian, like, right, they think of like, oh, so someone who was like raped by their priest, like, yeah, obviously that's a traumatic event, like that's a thing that's tied to religion. But like, I and that's obviously a traumatic thing. I'm not dismissing that or minimizing that. I'm just saying like that is an extreme example. I think a lot of people have more of what we talked about before, those little t traumas, as opposed to kind of a big T PTSD type trauma.
All right. Things that teach them inappropriate responses to appropriate stimuli, right? Daily life becomes an alien thing, and they don't
Yeah,
necessarily have a
when the
sense of self
brain
anymore.
and when the brain fires on like something being unsafe. So when the brain's firing on that fight or flight response for something that really doesn't require a fight or flight response, and we know that like the brain's just like it's brainstem stuff, it's not using its problem solving, it's not using its critical thinking, like it's kind of short circuiting on like, and fight or flight's a little oversimplified. There's freeze, there's fawn, like there are other options that the brain has, but it's one of those things where like we know it's not the full brain being used efficiently to make good informed decisions. It's kind of a panicky decision.
Right. And do people sort of recognize that short circuit in them when they come to you?
They are recognizing usually its symptoms. So they might be like, "Oh, I'm really anxious, or I'm having trouble with this relationship, or I have a history of relationship problems. Every time my parents call me, I have a panic attack, or like so like they'll people
Mhm.
come see me when the symptoms are becoming noticeable, not
Yes,
necessarily that they
right.
have like connected all the dots. And honestly, a lot of people still are like aware of the symptoms, but still like not connecting it to the religious trauma necessarily. That's why I talk big T little t trauma so much, because I think people have such a like reaction to the word trauma, like, oh, like I wasn't raped by my priest, or like I wasn't molested, or I wasn't, like nothing too bad happened to me. But like that's not, your brain doesn't care about that. Like your brain cares about whether or not you felt safe. And if you didn't feel safe and your brain processed that in a way where it didn't ever get to feel safe, like you didn't get support or you didn't have the opportunity to process it, it stays unsafe. And so like it doesn't really matter if it's a big deal to society or it would make headlines or somebody would report on it or not. If your brain decides that you're in danger and it never comes out of that danger mode, like that's what trauma is.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to pick up on something you were saying earlier about purity culture, and maybe we can talk more about that. I mean, I think when we talk about the effects of purity culture, it's mostly about the effects on women. And obviously that's important. But I think it also, maybe you can talk like, what are the effects on men? Because maybe that's less obvious, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea with the group. I mean, it's me and another guy running it, so we didn't necessarily we were aware that like, hey, our experience as men, we both happen to be white. So like our experience as like kind of the privileged group within an already privileged group of Christianity maybe isn't the safest space for everyone. But also, there's a lot of groups out there for women. Not like it's like abundant support. This is still a thing that I think is underserved, but there are groups for women. There are groups who are being led by people who are LGBTQ specifically for that community. So like, it wasn't that those groups aren't important and don't need resources. It was just kind of like, yeah, this is a niche area that nobody's really working in, and I think it's tricky because it's so easy to see the privilege, especially in Christianity, especially in something like evangelicalism, that like men are privileged, like it's a patriarchal religion. The men are privileged, but not every man experiences that as like a win. Like pastors are privileged in a very strict, strong way, like that power hierarchy. Like if you're just a dude who like grew up in that religion from the time you were born, and then you're like get married and you're supposed to be the head of the household and you have no idea what you're doing, or like your parents didn't teach you anything about money or sex, and all of a sudden you're married and your like spouse is mad at you. Like then all those teachings can kind of backfire because you have all these expectation put on you, but you haven't learned any skills, you don't have any tools to actually be successful. Like pray harder and believe harder doesn't actually mean that you're better with money, or doesn't mean that you're better at being a communicator. So I think a lot of men, even in that privilege setting, aren't experiencing privilege. Like they are, if we're comparing it to women or people of color or LGBTQ community, but they're not like thriving. And so I think like trying to address some of that. For me, I'm a millennial. Like I look around and I'm like, why do people like Jordan Peterson? He's an awful therapist. He seems to be an awful human being in general. Andrew Tate, like these other kind of like right wing, like men's YouTube type personalities, influencers. Like I look at that and it's taken me like a couple of years to wrap my hand around like who was enticed by this, like who thinks these are healthy role models. And like that's kind of the thing, like the church builds up male and masculinity to be this like powerful, like rich, successful kind of thing, and not everybody's experiencing that, and then they're looking around kind of drawn to these figures who are at least putting out that vibe that they're rich and powerful and successful, even if they're just pretending. So it was like that was part of it too for me, being like, okay, like dudes, they're like people my age or younger who are really struggling for role models, and like they're getting sucked into this other stuff because they're getting set up for failure. So I think it's that stuff, but then it's a lot of the same symptoms for females with purity culture. It's body shame. It's a lot of guilt and shame around what would be normal, healthy sexuality outside of a religious context. It's a lot of stuff, and so we're running this group, and we've gotten like all this really great feedback from other therapists, like pats on the back, retweet, reshare, all this stuff, and like it's been hard to get guys to sign up because I think it's so still shameful for a lot of them. Like it's hard to admit, or it's hard to say that like this was the thing that they were struggling from. All these therapists I know are like, oh, that's so awesome, what a great group, that's such a good idea, it's so needed. And like then to get like a random stranger to reach out and be like, oh yeah, I'm struggling with this, like so there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I still think that we're trying to normalize and like get it out there that like, hey, it's okay if you need help with this.
Which is probably the flip side of exactly what you're talking about with Andrew Tate and Red Pillars, right? Where it's like you can't admit that weakness, you can't blame yourself, you can't ask for help because it's not manly enough. So if to overcome this, I guess this is a chance for us to talk a little bit more about it and sort of overcome that stuff. What should men expect if they were to join this group? What would it look like? Yeah, just what would they go through?
Yeah, it's a lot of it's some basic psychoeducation, and I say basic and maybe that sounds pejorative, but like it's stuff like this is what sexuality is for everyone, this is just how it works, like this is what the science tells us, this is what research continually backs up. If we take the dogma out of it, like this is what normal healthy looks like. And that in and of itself is really powerful to normalize a lot of this, because like for a lot of dudes, they're not growing up with it at all. Like they're growing up being told to be ashamed of every like natural impulse they're feeling. Then they're probably watching porn on the DL and trying to keep it hidden in secret, so they're getting like unrealistic messages from that, and then they have all this guilt and shame cycle around it. So a lot of it is trying to just normalize it. I Anytime I've brought up purity culture with someone else who is raised evangelical, like they talk about like the apps that, or the sites that used to have to like track your internet browser history. They talk about accountability groups. They like so much stuff without even having to bring it up. People are already sharing and relating to. So I think there's a lot of like shared experience. And again, like normalizing like that was shitty to go through, and like it still affects me to this day, is really powerful. And then like giving them the blueprint for like this is what healthy outside of that religious context looks like, this is what healthy sexuality can look like, this is what healthy communication with your partners looks like, this is how to do consent in a healthy way, this is how to do, this is what healthy porn usage looks like, this is what like normal non-judgmental, non-shaming things look like here's your baseline. And then kind of being open to their input. But the group is really powerful because I think it's we can normalize it as therapists and say, this is what research says. But when you have 6 or 7 other guys like saying like, oh yeah, like that's how I grew up too, and that's how it still affects me, I think it normalizes a lot of the experience to be like, oh, like, right, there's nothing bad or broken about you. You were just given really bad information with, a sprinkling of eternal damnation on top of it for motivation. And like, that stuck for a long time. So I think giving that, it's kind of deconstructing some of that stuff, but then really trying to give them the blueprint for what healthy sexuality can look like moving forward. This is how to talk to your partners. This is how to challenge some of your negative thoughts. This is how to build confidence. This is what healthy communication looks like. So it's a lot of skill building, but I think like where the power is in a lot of normalizing the negative experiences and then trying to build something positive out of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's some meme about like men will do anything to avoid like going to therapy or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
yes,
made my whole career has been, especially with marriage therapy, like because I'm a guy, I get a lot of emails from prospective clients being
right.
like, I don't know that my husband will want to come, but I showed him your picture and he seems a little bit more comfortable with it.
Yeah,
Usually I
yeah,
have like
that's
my beard's pretty short right now. Usually I got like the big Viking beard going too. So it's
okay.
like, yeah, I'm a pretty non-threatening, like,
Mhm.
all right, I could go see this
Yeah,
guy for a session and see how it goes. And like, that's my pitch to a lot of people is like, just come to one session,
Yeah.
like see how it goes, because it's not scary. It's not terrible. It's like actually really nice when you get to talk to someone and they're supportive and helpful and non-judgmental. But yeah, there's still a lot of fear
Yeah.
and I think shame around, especially men coming to
Yeah.
therapy.
Do you guys always do it in group?
No, this is the first time running the group. So the other therapist who's co-leading it with me is we met through the religious trauma certification program. So it's like a go at your own pace kind of thing, but there's a Facebook group attached to it for therapists who are going through it. So like we kind of connected there, and it was just kind of like this idea. We batted around for a little bit. His story is really interesting too, just around like deconstructing. He like wrote a book about how to deal with lust while he was still a Christian, and so like
right.
it's been really fascinating as I've gotten to
Yes,
know him a little bit
yes.
personally, but then seeing
Uh-huh.
his kind of shift in the work he's doing.
Yeah,
So no,
right.
the idea with the group is like this is kind of like a jumping off point, and then this is our first time running the group, so we'll see what happens. But kind of the idea is like some people might continue either with like a coaching type relationship around their deconstruction or around some of the stuff we're working with. They might want us to do therapy. They might, I don't know, we might do like a less intense ongoing group. So we're kind of gonna like see how the group goes and reevaluate and see what we want to do.
Yeah. Has it been all in person, or are you doing it online as well?
It's all
It's all
online.
online. Oh, that's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. So it's people from all over as well. It's not geographically fixed.
Yeah, it's a coaching group. So because just the way licensure is around doing therapy in the state that you're licensed in, and the other therapist who's doing this with me is licensed in a different state. So it's set up as like a coaching group
Mhm.
so that we can offer it to more people without it being limited to specific states and having to deal with all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty awesome. So,
Yeah,
and this all, so it came from this, the religious trauma certification. How
yeah,
is that a new field? Is that can you tell us more about the field?
yeah. Yeah, it's a super new field. I think
Because I'd never heard of
I don't
that.
know, like okay. So like have you heard of this is where like my I've been an atheist for like 3 years, so I feel like I'm still new to it all. Like Marlene Winnell's book Leaving the Fold, I think came out in the late 90s, but that was like a pretty big I think seismic shift, and she did therapy, and so she's the one who coined religious trauma syndrome, which we don't call it a syndrome anymore, but she kind of coined that term. But like that was late 90s. So it's still in the world of psychology and therapy. It's still a very new field. There's not a ton of research. So the certification program I went through is tied to a research facility that's trying to like get the research basis that we need to back some of this stuff up. And they're doing conferences and bringing in speakers and all this stuff. So that's really great, I think, to get it out there. The Facebook group attached to like the certification process is pretty small still. So like looking at that stuff and be like, okay, this is a very small group of people still. But I think it's going to grow, and I think it's going to continue to be important as like the number of religious people continues to decline seemingly pretty rapidly. And we know, like, coming out of COVID, there's not a ton of research, but like that's been a big blow to a lot of church attendance. So I imagine this will be a thing people are going to want to keep getting certification in, because there's a pretty big group of people out there who have gone through a deconversion recently or who are deconverting right now.
Yeah. And would you say like the people who come to you, are most of them sort of seeking help with religious trauma, or is it, I don't know if you
That's
can sort
still,
of divide it up or what?
yeah, no, that's still a subsection of my
Okay.
caseload.
Okay.
Like I
Hmm.
still I still say my bread and butter is marriage and family therapy. I have ADHD, so like I like having a mix of people on my
Hmm.
caseload. That's been hard for me marketing, because I I get a little too
Right.
Yeah.
distracted with what I want to work with. I'm
Yeah.
not always like,
Right.
here's my ideal client.
Yeah.
But no, so I'm trying to I market myself as a couples therapist, and then I market myself with like a subspecialty in religious trauma. So still a minority on my caseload. It's not 50-50. I would say it's still probably maybe a quarter of people. I'd say it's less than a third of my people are coming specifically for religious trauma stuff. And again, like I'm figuring out how to market some of that stuff. I have been doing the work for a while, I feel like, but my certification was still, last year. So still trying to figure out, because a lot of people don't know that it's religious trauma that they have. So like even trying to
Right. That's
figure out
true.
how to
Yes.
market some of that stuff. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
but there's a growing amount of people on Instagram. I see there's more and more podcasts around it. There's more and more YouTube channels around it. So I think it's, again, like a growing need that people are starting to tap into and build support around, but it's still a newish field. There's some research that's coming out. It's been teased. I don't want to say it's coming out with like a definitive date. I know it's supposed to come out this spring. There's a pretty significant study around religious trauma that passed peer reviewed, but it hasn't been published yet. So hopefully that'll come out, and then we'll start to have some numbers behind like how to do the therapy around some of the research, and what the research is informing
Mm,
for therapists moving forward.
yeah. And so, how often? I mean, and this is one that I'm not sure how controversial it'll be. Does that move from like identifying religious trauma, has it either led to people deconverting, or have you worked in therapy with people who were going through that process and didn't want to do it openly? Is that also part of your practice?
Yeah. Yes. I really like working with people who are like actively
Mm,
deconverting, because I think it's such a fascinating experience. Like there's so many doors that
mm,
open like immediately once you hit that point of like, right, this belief is unhealthy. I don't believe it
yeah.
anymore. Now what?
Mm,
And like, that's kind of the point of your podcast, is like, right,
yeah.
like being an atheist is one thing, but then what do you do after
Exactly.
that?
Yeah.
So like
Yes.
it's such a, like, that can be so powerful and can be so transformative for people. So like I love working with that, but again, it's super hard to market. Like that's a very
Yeah.
small niche for like, hey, I'm working with people who are questioning their faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
I have people who are maybe like leaving a high control religion but are staying religious. I have people who are questioning whether they're going to stay religious or not. I have people who are not religious but spiritual. So like, it's a mix of where they're at and where they want to be. As much as when I was working at Christian counseling places, I was very like ethical in my practice and not proselytizing people then. Like I'm
Right.
still like not
Hmm.
proselytizing now, even as an
Yeah.
atheist.
Yes.
Like I'm not trying to
Yeah.
get people to deconvert. Like that's not
Right.
my goal.
Yes.
But I think so much after my own deconversion, so much I look back and see is like it didn't maybe bother me, but it was still unhealthy. And the only reason it didn't bother me while I was religious was because I was privileged. So like it's hard for me to see some of that stuff or hear people going through it and not highlight like, well, is that really healthy for you? Like, is that serving you well or not?
Right.
But
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
I do that genuinely. I don't do that with like kind of the expected answer of like, no, religion is bad for you. You should not be
Hmm.
religious. Like
Right.
trying to get
Yeah.
people to a
Right.
healthy place. Some people want to go
Yeah.
to like a Unitarian Universalist church after this. Some people want to like do some sort of like, I identify as atheo-pagan now, which is like atheistic paganism. So like no gods or goddesses, but like that experience of community,
Mm.
that experience of like ritual and like small m magic. Oh, the atheo-pagans will be mad that I said magic, but like there's no woo, there's no nothing in it. It's like, but like,
Uh-huh.
saying like, hey, going out in nature is powerful for
Uh-huh.
people. Like it doesn't need to be some other extra being or higher power. It's just like, yeah, the woods are awesome, rivers are cool. Like, so it's kind of, for me, like walking through that process and seeing other people walk through that process, like I think it can be really transformative and powerful, but I'm not trying to
Right.
swing them any direction.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think a lot
Yeah.
of people hit that like not religious, but spiritual. And like, I don't know, that seems like a comfortable landing place for a lot of people.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We wanted to talk more in the bonus about the atheo-pagan stuff,
Yeah.
but
So that's
Sure.
a taste.
I wanted to
Sorry.
ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just exactly. Yeah.
A teaser. Make sure to
Yeah.
get on my
Like and
Patreon.
subscribe.
Yeah.
Make a donation.
Yeah. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you about like the sort of marriage and couples therapy, and how does religion come into that? Like, is that a common source of friction for couples that you work with?
Definitely, if someone's deconverted or deconverting and the other person is not, that's just really hard to go through, especially like if you started the relationship believing the same thing. So again, like I shared in my personal experience, like I am aware that I was lucky that my wife was at that point too. So that can be really hard. Even like the language around that is really gross now. Like I hate the phrase like unevenly yoked. Like that sounds so gross.
Yes.
But like that's so yeah, like that, and there isn't, if you're in a high control religion, like there isn't that leeway to be like, oh well, like as long as you still like believe in a god, or you still like go to church, even if it's not like particularly one denomination or another. Like for high control religions, like nah, if you're not this particular sect, like I don't want to be married to you anymore. So I think it plays out a lot there. There's a lot of like there's still a lot of like, once you deconvert, you're an atheist. There's still a lot of like unprogramming or reprogramming that needs to happen. Like if you grew up like hearing wives submit to your husbands, and like that was the goal, and that was like put on a pedestal, and like that's what you were trying to do for a long time, and then you deconvert, like that doesn't just go away. Like just because you're an atheist now doesn't mean that that doesn't affect your behaviors, that hasn't affected your self-esteem, that doesn't affect how you do boundaries. So like again, it still comes up in a lot of different ways, even if both people have deconverted, or even if they're not coming in for spiritual reasons or religious reasons. Like I still see a lot of that bad boundary stuff. When I was a Christian therapist, again, I think I was doing it differently than other Christians would have been doing it, but like I had so many sessions around that one passage of wives submit to your husbands, husbands love your wives like Christ loved the church. Like we spun so many wheels around like dudes who couldn't like, no, it means she just has to listen to me, she has to agree with whatever I'm saying. And like I was like, nope, that's not. So like again, I think I look back and kind of chuckle, like I wonder if other Christians would have heard my sessions, if they would have agreed with what I was saying. But like in that mode, I was doing what was healthy for couples. I was doing my couples work that we have a ton of science and research and good backing on, like this is what healthy couples do. So it was like I was always like kind of making it make sense for what the science said, not like being like, oh yeah, right, that's in the Bible, so I guess you should do it. So yeah, even though I've only been an atheist for a minute now, like I still think of like, yeah, I've been doing this work for a long time with people arguing about scripture or fighting over how to interpret the Bible. So like, yeah, it's not easy. I just talked recently at a different conference on like bad boundaries in the Bible, and like it was a silly topic because it's like, right, they're all kind of bad.
yeah. But
like,
in one
too broad of a topic.
In one sense, you were doing, I mean, at least in a lot of ways, like secular work, right? Like you're promoting people behaving, thinking, believing, acting in a way that's not what the church says, or contrary to it, or totally the opposite of it. And for us, like that's part of what, like what Beyond Atheism looks to is this question of, okay, like when you get past the church, when you say, okay, religion is not a good basis for our morality, for our ethics, for how we ought to treat other people in our life, but then we're faced with a void. And this, it sounds like it's something that you've been able to fill with these couples. It's like you promote an ethos. What is it, something that other atheists ought to be doing to promote their own well-being, whether in a relationship or just like overcoming that trauma, or just like, programming themselves, programming their children, to put it that way?
Yeah.
Or educating, I guess might be a better way.
Educating, not indoctrinating. Yeah. No, I mean, you brought up the word ethos. Like, I talk about meaning making a lot. Like, what is driving your meaning? I talk about being congruent, like where our thoughts match our behaviors, match our feelings, match our like belief system or our meaning making systems. So, like, religion, whether people are deconverting or not, like for a lot of people, they have been making it make sense in their own way for a long time. Like when even religious groups do research around like theology, most people who are sitting in the church on Sunday aren't 100% on their theology. Like they're making it make sense in their own way. So like trying to guide couples towards research, trying to guide couples towards critical thinking skills where it's like this informs your meaning making. This is how you can build meaning together. This is how you as a human being, as a person, can have healthy boundaries without it being someone else's boundaries, but it making sense for you based on what's important to you. So I think like building that meaning making, knowing where that comes from, like it's not just jumping out of nowhere and you're not making it up as you go, and you're not like, well, this priest says this and this pastor says this and this person gave a sermon on YouTube once, so like, yeah, we're just gonna flip-flop all over the place. But being like, yeah, this is how I can work through this stuff on my own. This is how I can find good helpful information and not just what the person who happens to be the pastor in the area that I happen to be living right now says.
Wow. Jeremy, this has been fantastic. You've taken us on a journey. I've learned so much, but now we're going to move into the lightning round. The lightning round is just a series of yes or no questions. And you can give a short, longish explanation. There are no wrong answers. Well, yeah, there are no right answers either, I suppose.
I've listened to enough of your episodes to feel like there are about a couple of wrong answers.
Okay. Okay.
I think I gave some of them.
I'll see if I can make one up tonight. We'll see.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'll start off with our kind of baseline question. Can a true atheist believe in God?
No, because that's what atheist means, right? Atheist is against theism. So I would say like semantics, no. I think, and I've listened to enough episodes to hear people say yes to this question.
Yes.
I think again, there's this growing trend in people to want meaning in their lives, and they ascribe that to some sort of higher power or spirituality, but they might still identify as atheist. So I think having some space for people who want to say yes, but I personally would say no, an atheist. And if I use that word atheist, or like I talk about atheopaganism, like the atheo in that means no gods, no goddesses, no higher powers. It's helpful for words to have agreed upon meaning. So I would say atheist means no God.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, can a true atheist worship Gaia or Mother Earth?
I again would say no. I've spent more time around pagans than ever before. You know, I was raised to think they were heathens and they were gonna make me demon possessed somehow.
It happened.
Apparently they got me. No, so I hear a lot of people who will use those phrases, and in their heads and the way they're using it is metaphorically or allegorically, and I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue with people who think there's an actual external entity somewhere who's controlling things or in charge of things. Like, I go back to like science and research and what can pass peer review. Like, I think that's how we need to be. I think things need to be able to be replicated in a controlled setting for us to have some ability to make decisions based off of it. Like, I'm not going to make a decision based off of what your second cousin said happened when they were playing with a Ouija board. Like, that's not enough information for me to make an informed decision around that. So I kind of go back to like, if it can't be replicated, if it can't be proven in a controlled setting, then it's not worth, it doesn't have utility for making life decisions around.
Right. Okay. Can a true atheist have vanilla sex?
Ooh.
A bunch of them do. So do Christians. I have a phrase. I talk about missionary Wednesdays. I have a lot of. This is when I was working with Christian couples too. Couples who like have sex because they're supposed to, and it's like very dry and boring and uninspired. So I was always like very pro sex and pro kink, and like, hey, like Christians, you're supposed to like enjoy this, so figure it out. There's a whole like weird book in the Old Testament about sex, so. Yeah, sure. People, I think I and a lot of other atheists have a lot of respect for individual rights and for people to do things that make sense for them. So, hey, if you're happy with your vanilla sex life, enjoy. Do I think there's better opportunity and more options out there that you should definitely explore? Yeah, but like, to each their own, whatever kind of floats your boat. I'm not going to I'm not going to try and throw shade if it's healthy and if it's sustainable for you. That's
Mm.
wonderful.
All right. Then can a true atheist worry about dying?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's anything in not believing in a god that makes death less scary, because ultimately we don't know what's coming next, and human beings, the human brain is wired to be afraid of the unknown. It's why little kids are scared of the dark initially. Like, that unknown is scary. And so, like, I have a lot of grace for that. I don't think a true atheist is going to be afraid of going to hell, because that afterlife piece is a thing that we want to deconstruct and leave behind. But does that mean you're confident? Like, if you get in a car accident and you're bleeding out, does that mean you're going to feel awesome because you're like, I'm an atheist, I don't have to worry about this? Like, no, I think there's still some fear that goes into it, and that's natural and to be expected.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, can a true atheist believe everything happens for a reason?
If that reason is there were millions, billions of variables that have coincided to get us to that point, sure. If that reason is some
Yes.
sort of higher power pulling these puppet strings, no.
Okay.
Because then that's some weird version of theism somewhere.
Mm.
Can I get on a soapbox for
Sure,
a
go
minute
for it.
here? Right, that's what this is
Sure,
for.
yeah, go ahead.
I've spoken out for years against AA,
Oh,
Alcoholics Anonymous,
Okay,
because it's
yeah, yeah.
it's pseudo religion and it's pseudoscience, and it's
Mhm.
unhelpful for most people who go through it. And for whatever reason,
Mm.
we're like the biggest country in the United States that does it. Like, other countries are like, oh, your problem with alcohol, here's a pill that makes you feel sick if you have more than one drink, and like that's just how they treat it, and like that's how you deal with it. And we don't do that. Like, go to AA. Like, research is hard with AA because it's anti letting people in, it's anti letting people study. That's the anonymous part, but it's to protect itself, because the research that's been done on it suggests less than a third of people who go benefit from it. So I'm always like skeptical of those pseudo religions. Like, they don't help people. Like, just because, as much as I will say like being an evangelical is bad for people, I think like this loose sort of like amorphous pseudo religion is also unhelpful for people. Like, it takes away like a lot of personal choice and a lot of autonomy, and you're giving it to, like, I don't believe there's anything out there, so you're just giving it away, and then you're hoping, like, fingers crossed, something magically works out for you. Like, that's not a helpful way to live.
yeah, excellent. And to shift gears yet again, can a true atheist, or perhaps should a true atheist, marry someone who is deeply religious?
They sure can. They should probably plan on some therapy, start setting some money aside early in the process.
Right.
You know, people of different religious strengths, intensities, belief systems marry often, and like it's workable. I worked with that a lot. I still see that occasionally. Like, I think it's doable. I think if you have really good communication and you set clear expectations early on, like, don't wait to have kids and then try and decide like, oh, enrollment starts next week, are we putting them in a religious school or not? Like, those are conversations that have to happen ahead of time. Like, you can't put that off. You can't punt that down the road. Like, those are things that need to get decided early on in the process. The issue, I think, is a lot of people, they're getting married in, let's say, their late 20s is the average now. I think it's 27 or 28 is the average American getting married. Like, you're a different person when you're 38, 39. You're a different person in your 40s. So like, even if you have those healthy conversations, is there wiggle room? Is there growth that can happen naturally over a lifetime where you can still agree to those decisions that you made? And like, it's really hard. I'm not going to say, again, like, not trying to yuck other people's yums, but like, hey, like, this is going to be tough. Like, there's a lot that's working against you if this is the decision that you're making. So you said, should someone, like, I don't like to make that call for people, but if you're asking me to like put money on, like, is that going to be a healthy relationship forever? Like, nah, I'm going to bet against that, I'm going to say there's going to be some problems in that setup.
Right. Okay. And similarly, on the issue of raising kids, can a true atheist raise children to believe in hell?
They shouldn't. I'm comfortable
Okay.
saying shouldn't there.
Okay.
As that's one of the things that I really like stuck on. And I was like not calling myself an atheist yet, but I was right on the like doorstep. And it was like one of those things where it's like, there's no way in all of my psychological training, there's nothing that makes it okay to teach a 3 or 4 year old that they're going to hell for something that they didn't do. So it was just one of those things where it's like, there's like, I know so much about brain development. I know so much about like childhood development. Like there's no way to do this in a developmentally appropriate way. Like it's just not a developmentally appropriate topic. So, no, I don't know why an atheist would be believing in hell. It's, back to my earlier question, like, I don't think someone who's, atheist in the sense they don't believe in a god or a higher power would believe in hell. So seems cruel to teach your kid about hell if you don't believe in that.
This could be like a lazy parenting strategy or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like teach them about the Finnish version of Santa who like steals little kids and doesn't just bring coal but kidnaps children. Like if you're gonna pick a myth, like go with something less eternal, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, I think you passed. I think you did well. I didn't detect any wrong answers there.
That's good. My atheist card is still drying, so I'm excited I passed the test.
This has been a fantastic talk. Learned a lot. It flew by and just jam-packed. If people are interested in the group or just want to learn more, possibly join, how should they go about that? Where can they look?
Yeah, so the group's closed now. So it's a closed group, so we're going to run it for 6 weeks. But we're talking about when we're going to run the next one. We're thinking summer, maybe early summer, depending on what a wait list looks like for people. So definitely check out my website, wellnesswithjared.com. There's a tab on religious trauma, and then I got a contact page, and there will be an application that people can fill out to get on that wait list. And then I'm on Instagram too. So a lot of stuff gets posted there. The guy that I'm running the group with, he and I cross post a lot of our stuff. So it's pretty easy.
We'll have links down below as well. Excellent. Awesome. Jeremy, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that was Jeremy Schumacher. Really
fantastic.
Talking with him. So Todd, what did you take away from that conversation?
Well, I mean, the big thing is Jeremy's a professional. He's been doing it for a while. He knows his stuff. It's great to hear. And with that, comes his professional insight. And one of the points he made, which I thought was fantastic, it's kind of something that I think we as atheists either intuit or, we feel but don't necessarily say. But he came out and said it. It's like for control religions, trauma is a feature. It's not a bug. It's not a side effect. It's what it's meant to do. And hearing someone say that from a professional background, that's pretty powerful. It's clarifying, I think, and we can see it much more clearly and understand that that's part of what's been happening. And we know that when people come out of it, that's something that a lot of people have to deal with. And the second thing is his current practice, what he's doing with group, what he's doing with people, that he's certified in religious trauma, that it's being recognized and being studied and people are working on a practice, that he helps people through issues with deconversion and recovery. It shows that there's a mainstream cachet now, right? This is something where it's part of atheism or irreligion in general. This small a atheism. It's about it becoming a little more mainstream and something we can talk more openly about. I think the audience probably remembers when we were talking to Recovery from Religion. One of the things that they made it very clear is it's anonymous. Everything's anonymous, and it has to be anonymous. You can't even list to secular, quote unquote, secular therapists because they're going to get tarred and feathered, right? There's a risk associated with that. And Jeremy is sticking his neck out, and he's doing it he's coming from a place where he worked in Christian mental health services. So to see that step being taken is really, really empowering. And if people are comfortable with where they are, if they're safe where they are, to have this resource is, I think, invaluable. Something that can be very specifically targeted to them, and that they know that that's what they're getting. You know, if you're suffering from religious trauma, if you think that's what it is, if you're working through your deconversion and you want someone professional, someone with training, to kind of guide a little bit, or to meet I mean, the group thing was fantastic, right? It's other people going through a similar experiences, realizing they're not alone. It's great that that's open now, that there is an opening. If you're not safe, this probably is not the resource for you. And there are those other resources available. But yeah, it's good to see these things happening. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the fact that it's now possible to talk about like religious trauma as a thing that people experience. I mean, it wouldn't be possible, a few decades ago because everyone, like Christianity or religion is so kind of spread throughout the culture that it wouldn't really be known about. But yeah, now that there are more and more nuns who are moving out of religion, they will see that this is a thing that people will deal with.
Yeah.
I found it helpful when he was talking about this idea of like big T trauma versus little T trauma, and I think it makes a lot of sense that like maybe we do think about trauma as these like going to war or getting in a serious car accident or something, but like I think it's a good point that there are all these like little T traumas as well, which are not as dramatic maybe, but can nonetheless really hurt your quality of life. So I think it's a good thing that psychologists are now kind of recognizing this is a thing and figuring out how it can be treated or helped or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know about you, but I still have, as a recovering Catholic, you're always in recovery. You're never cured. As a recovering Catholic, there's still the lingering guilt about everything, which although I do feel a lot better, but I've talked to other friends in similar positions, and it's, like, yeah, you recognize that it has an effect, and that burden of guilt and the anxiety that you carry with you every day, and it's not from being molested by a priest, it's just from the indoctrination and the constant reinforcement that you're a bad person. And it's tough to learn that you're not a bad person, that we're in the world and that we are who we are. So yeah, it's great work that he's doing and super appreciated. It's insightful all around.
Yeah. I think another interesting thing was like this issue about like ideas about gender that are kind of spread from evangelical religious groups or even mainstream religious groups, like and I think it's true that kind of these patriarchal ideas hurt women the most, and like non-binary people and people who don't fit into these gender norms, but also like it hurts men as well in different ways. And I think it's important that he's talking about that as well.
Right.
I think that's important.
The assigned roles, it's not for everyone,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the double-edged sword of privilege. There's a real dialectic there, and it helps inform our notions of freedom and liberty. That's great stuff. So we've got, if you're interested in it, he said the group is closed now, but you can join a waiting list or just get in touch with him. I'm sure more people would lead to more things. We'll have links for that below. Anything else we need to touch on here, Nathan?
Just to thank our Patreon or patron supporters.
Of course. Absolutely. Big ups.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
They're the best. And remember, if you throw us a few ducats, you get the behind the scenes stuff. And that's where the action is, because we just learned a lot about atheopaganism, and man, that sounds like some fun times. And yeah, it's just about springtime here. It's the equinox, so somebody's got to be doing something.
Right. Yes. Right.
It's time to get it's time to get pagan. It's time to get weird with it.
Yes.
We got that. So yeah, big love to the Patreons. If you don't have any money to spare, be sure to like and subscribe. That always helps us. We super appreciate it. It makes you aware of when the new episodes drop. If you have a lot of money hanging around, be sure to contribute to Atheist United. It's an organization in Los Angeles that's building a network, building institutions, and helping keep the dream alive of normalizing atheism and creating a truly secular world, which we're a big part of now, as we're a part of the AU studios. So check out those guys, other people on the studio system as well. And if you have any complaints, that goes to Nath G. Alexander on the Twitters. Are you still on Twitter? It's not broken yet?
Technically, I am. Technically, I'm still there, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm such an internet hermit. It's terrible. All I do is... I'm part of anti-social media. Any other business we need to attend to?
Just to thank the audience once more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys are the best. Love hearing from you. And until next time, bye-bye.